Hey, everybody, it's Pastor John with your Midweek Moment for this week. And, I had kind of a bad morning this morning before I came to work. Actually, I guess that's kind of an exaggeration. Let's say I didn't have a particularly good morning before I came to work. You've probably had a morning like this, just one of those mornings where it seems like everything from like getting up, getting breakfast, getting dressed, everything is just takes longer than it's supposed to, and it just seems to be a little harder than it should be, and it seems like nothing just works out completely right. Well, that's what my morning was like. It just one little annoyance after another, so that by the time I got out to the car to drive here to church, I was in a fairly whiny sort of mood. So I start my car and the radio comes on, and I was listening to WSHU, which is a national public radio and classical music station. And Kate Remington, who was their morning host, came on, and she said the next selection they were going to play was the ballet Appalachian Spring by Aaron Copland. And I immediately felt better, because the ballet Appalachian Spring by American Copland is one of my favorite pieces of American music. And like most people who love it, I love it particularly for the climax, which is something that Copland adapted from the Shaker folk tune Simple Gifts. You know, da 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 da. So I'm listening to it, and as I start listening to it, and I get out of the driveway and I head down the road and I start coming to work. The longer it goes on, the better I start feeling, and so finally, by the time the piece is over, I was actually in a pretty good mood. And as I was thinking about that, as I was making the rest of the drive to work, it reminded me of something that Benjamin Franklin wrote once. Franklin wrote once that beer is a sign that God loves us and wants us to be happy. Now, you may think to yourself, what does a ballet have to do with beer? But it seems to me they're both, in their way, little tiny signs of God's grace. You know, usually when we think of God's grace, we think of it operating in a dramatic sort of way. If a loved one is in the hospital and they get better when it seems like they weren't going to, we see that as a sign of God's grace. Maybe when we have a friend or a family member for whom we've been concerned for months or years finally comes to faith, maybe we see that as a sign of grace. When you get the job that you're looking for, when you get the mortgage is approved by the bank. For those big things that happen, we tend to see those as signs of God's grace. But the thing is, if you look around for it, the signs of God's grace are absolutely everywhere. I think you can find them on the radio when, the radio station plays just exactly the music you need to hear. You can find them, I don't know, you can find it having a conversation with a good friend. You can find signs of God's grace when it's not 15 degrees and snowing outside. You can find signs of God's grace, when your cat jumps up on your lap, when you're feeling lonely and depressed. You can find God's grace in a good glass of beer, maybe, on a hot summer day. The point is, there are signs of God's grace everywhere if we're just willing to look for them. And like Franklin said, all of those little signs of grace, I think, are all signs that God loves us and wants us to be happy. When I was going to my old Assemblies of God church in New Jersey, one of the hymns, one of the hymns we would sing occasionally was a hymn called Count Your Blessings. It's not, at least I don't think it's, hang on a second, let me take a look. I'm back. I don't think it's in our hymnal, but let me take a look really quick. No, it's not. Anyway, the basic part of the song is, when you feel crappy and life is bad, things aren't going the way you want, what you should do is you should stop and count, and count your blessings. Because all of those blessings, whether they're big or small, are all signs of God's grace. They're all signs that God loves us and wants us to be happy. So let me encourage you to do that if there's some time in the coming week when you feel kind of bad. Maybe you have a morning like mine, just not a morning that's disastrous, but just one where nothing seems to go completely right. Or maybe if something seriously bad happens to you this week, take a second and do what that old hymn suggested we do. Take a second to sort of count your blessings. Take a second to think about all of the little small routine signs of God's grace, the signs of God's grace that are always there, but maybe sometimes we don't recognize. Maybe we don't recognize them because we're looking for something that's big and dramatic. We're looking to get the job or the mortgage or whatever it is. But if you just look around for them, you'll see that there are these little small routine signs of God's grace everywhere. And just like Franklin said, I think they are all signs that God loves us and wants us to be happy. Thanks.